On September 17, 2015, a contract fuel driver named Nolan Briggs took the Upper Cold Creek Road because a fire cash order had gone unanswered for 2 days. And the district office wanted to know why a Forest Service crew had missed both supply call windows. He expected a late breakfast and bad tempers. He found 6 hard hats hanging from nails under the cook tarp. He found 2 trucks where they should not have been. One backed against the tool shed with the driver door open. One facing downhill with the keys still in the ignition and the battery dead. He found a folding table set for supper that had gone stiff in the mountain air. There were beans crusted in a pot, bread gone green at the edges, coffee grounds swollen in a press no one had cleaned. He found sleeping bags rolled open but empty. He found work gloves in pairs. He found a deck of cards on the bunkhouse floor, with the Queen of Hearts bent in half under a boot print that had dried and darkened days before. He went to the communications trailer because that was where the radio would be. And he stopped at the door. The steel frame had been bowed inward from the inside. The latch was still hooked. Mud prints ran up the inner jamb, crossed the ceiling, and ended directly above the far bunk. They were too large for a man, too narrow for a bear, too high for anything Nolan had seen in 20 years of hauling fuel into burned country and storm country and timber country. He did not key his radio. He did not walk farther in. He backed away, got into his truck, and drove down 9 miles without stopping. He did not report it until he reached the pay phone beside the closed store at Orleans. The official search lasted 11 days. 3 bodies were recovered over the next month. 1 was never recovered. The case file concluded that a damaged vehicle, a night evacuation attempt, rough terrain, and exposure caused the deaths. Insurance was paid. The site was abandoned. The door frame was replaced before winter. Listen closely. My name is Eli Mercer. I was a United States Forest Service ranger assigned to the Red Alder District. And by the time we were sent into the Upper Cold Creek drainage, I had spent 12 fire seasons in the Klamath Mountains and 4 more in trail and access management. I knew washouts, I knew cat roads. I knew how long food lasted in wet air and how long men lasted when the woods got into their heads. The drainage sat inside Old Karuk territory, and there were places in that country where even the maps seemed reluctant. Our assignment was simple on paper: reopen an overgrown service route. Inspect a communications repeater that had failed twice that summer. And verify a set of internal closure notes people in the district office called the silent zone protocols, without ever telling us who had written them or why. There were 6 of us. Owen Kell handled equipment and maintenance. He was 43, broad-shouldered, careful with tools. And he marked every tightened lug nut with a stripe of yellow grease pencil, because he believed memory was how machines killed you. Every morning he checked tire pressure before he drank his coffee. Every evening he wrote a fixed maintenance list on the inside cover of a stained pocket calendar, and crossed each line off with the same green pen. Marisol Vega ran communications and mapping. She was the youngest on the crew, 28, sharp, organized, and incapable of speaking before she had 2 cups of coffee. She kept her hair twisted up with a carpenter pencil and carried a field map folded to the exact same square all week so. The creases had gone white. Ben Kearns was our sawyer and primary driver. He was the kind of man who could feather a truck down a road on washboard without spilling a thermos. At lunch, he shuffled cards with one hand and always tried to start a game of cribbage. No one had time to finish. He had a habit of tapping the wheel twice before he started an engine. Talia Redbird was our hydrology technician and local liaison because part of the route touched an old burn scar above a creek crossing that had once been flagged for cultural review. She measured side flow, culvert depth and bank softness, because she trusted water less than fire. Every night she copied her numbers into a blue notebook and tucked it under her pillow so it would stay flat. Dana Pike handled wildlife survey and camera documentation. He talked softly, moved quickly, and wrote fuel levels in a notebook that did not belong to him, because he said someone had to keep a record once the official records started lying. He brought sunflower seeds and left the shells in tidy little stacks on whatever stump or tailgate he happened to be using. And there was me, crew lead, ranger, the one with the district code key and the sealed envelope that held the silent zone protocols. I opened it on the first afternoon and found 6 pages of typed instructions with no signature and no date. Stay in pairs beyond the line shack. Do not remain in the drainage after full dark. Use only marked routes after sunset. Report repeated perimeter sign immediately. If the woods go quiet, return to camp. If an escort is established, do not break formation. The last page had been removed. That should have been the first thing that sent us home. The first 3 days felt ordinary enough to shame any fear we might have admitted later. We cleared alder and vine maple from the road. Ben ran the saw with the easy rhythm of a man who had done it so long the machine sounded like part of his breathing. Owen serviced the truck, tightened the old brush rig, checked the spare belts, and crawled under the axle with his green pen tucked behind his ear. Marisol climbed the repeater tower platform and cursed the dead relay box in a voice too calm to be real. Dana swapped memory cards in the trail cameras that had been mounted there after an old bear complaint. Talia walked the creek line each evening and came back with wet boots and that blue notebook in her hand. The work rhythm mattered. That is what people who have never worked remote country do not understand. You measure safety in stupid little repetitions. The smell of chain oil, coffee before first light, wet socks steaming by the stove, Owen laying out sockets in a perfect row, Ben slapping a fresh deck onto the mess table and saying this time we finished the game, Marisol turning the radio knob with her little finger because she said the static bit less that way, Dana shaking seed shells out of his pocket before he climbed into a cab. Nothing hunted us then, nothing even announced itself. By the end of the 3rd day, we had the upper spur mostly open, the repeater housing stripped for parts, and the main camp in a routine that felt so normal I remember being embarrassed by the sealed envelope in my pack. Talia mentioned, almost in passing, that the creek was running quieter than its depth suggested, as if some of the water had found another path under the slope. Owen told her culverts in old roadbeds always lied. He was almost right. That evening Ben set the cards out and no one sat down. The coffee on the stove went cold because Marisol was still trying to raise the district office through a hand mic that only answered with hiss. No anomaly, no voice. No cry in the trees, just a silence that seemed to begin a little too early. On the 4th morning Dana found the first sign while checking the north perimeter camera. He called us over. 6 fir trunks stood in a rough arc outside camp. Each one had fresh bark peeled from the camp-facing side. The exposed strips were almost clean. Sap still beaded at the edges. The lowest mark sat at 7 feet 4 inches. The highest sat at 7 feet 7. The distance from the fire ring to the nearest strip trunk was 41 feet. The farthest was 44. Dana photographed them with a date stamp while I measured each one aloud, and Marisol wrote the numbers on the back of a map. Owen crouched by the nearest trunk, touched the sap and said black bear. He stood and looked again. Big one, he looked at the other trees. Same circuit, same curiosity. Camp smell, food smell, it happens. It did happen, just not like that. What made it wrong was not the height, bears stand. Men reach, storm break strips bark. What made it wrong was the spacing. The arc was too even. The marks faced inward. Whatever had made them had walked the same distance from our fire ring all the way around camp and tested 6 points as if it were checking a fence line. That night Dana found similar sign downslope. 3 fresh impressions in powder soil where the old service line cut the hill. Each one longer than my forearm from wrist to elbow, 5 toe marks, narrow heel. Depth like a man stepping hard downhill. The stride between them measured 7 feet and chain. Owen said slide distortion and slope stretch. He said a partial elk track can do ugly things when the dirt is thin, and the eye wants a monster. He was almost right again. Marisol wanted out the minute she saw the prints. We took the vote after supper because that is what crews do when nobody wants to admit they are afraid, and everybody wants procedure. To save them from saying it plain, Marisol voted to leave. I voted to stay one more day and verify the repeater en route. Owen voted to stay because machines fail in ugly country all the time, and if we ran from every strange sign, we would never work again. Ben voted to stay because the truck was solid and daylight was good, and he did not like turning a road around half-cut. Dana voted to stay because he wanted the camera cards from the North Line, and because curiosity is a disease in some men. Talia voted to stay, though she did it slowly, because she said she wanted one more morning to check the creek and prove to herself the side drainage was normal. 5-1. Marisol folded the map smaller than I had ever seen it folded, and said nothing else that night. The 5th day brought more evidence and less room for excuses. The perimeter sign had shifted. The new stripped bark sat farther out, never closer. As if the thing making it was content to test our boundary without crossing it. We found broken salal at knee height, in a full circle beyond the trucks. Dana measured the ring at roughly 45 feet from camp on the west side, and 48 on the east. The variation was small enough to matter. There were no drag marks, no rooting, no torn soil, no feeding sign. Just systematic movement at a fixed distance. Watching testing. The coffee had gone cold by the time we finished photographs. That afternoon, we found the old line shack door standing open. I knew I had barred it the first day. Inside, nothing had been taken, nothing had been broken. 1 can of peaches had been moved from the shelf to the center of the floor. Beside it sat Dana's fuel notebook, which had been on the mess table that morning. No tracks in, no tracks out. Owen said somebody on the crew was trying to get a rise out of the rest of us. He said that because the other explanation was worse. No one answered him. On the 6th morning, Marisol woke me before dawn and put a battery cell in my palm. It had been removed from the emergency radio pack, not torn out. Removed, we went to the communications trailer. The spare cells from both emergency packs were lined up on the desk in 2 perfect rows. The hand crank generator had been disassembled, and every bolt placed beside it from largest to smallest. Outside, the antenna cable had been pulled out of its conduit without a tear in the sheath. The portable satellite set was still in its case. But the dish mount had been bent flat against the frame by pressure, so even Owen, who could explain weather damage in his sleep, just stared at it. No storm had touched us. No animal had done that. No person had come through camp without leaving sign. Dana was due back at first light from the North Line camera. He had gone before sunrise because he wanted to check whether the perimeter arc showed on the night footage, and because we had not yet started enforcing pairs for simple work beyond sight of camp. He should have been back by breakfast. He was not. The pan was still on the stove when we went looking. We found his first sign a quarter mile north, where the service line crossed an open patch of gray soil. His boot tracks went straight across the clearing, then they stopped. There were no return prints. There were no wandering circles. There was a furrow in the dirt between the last 2 impressions, narrow at first, then deeper. As if something heavy had been drawn uphill without touching the ground for the first few feet, and then dropped once before being lifted. Again. His orange hard hat hung on a branch almost 9 feet up. His radio was clipped to the chin strap. The transmit button was pressed in under a streak of mud. We found one torn strip of his vest on a splintered cedar trunk, and one sunflower seed shell stuck to the wet bark. That was all not lost. Not wandered, taken. No one said it first, we all knew it. After that we moved in pairs, to piss, to cut brush, to walk 50 feet for tools, pairs only. I made it an order. Owen did not argue. Marisol kept glancing over her shoulder, even when she was standing in the center of camp. Ben stopped bringing cards to the table. The thing in the trees changed with us. It stopped circling wide. It started pulling at the edges. At dusk on the 6th day, we heard Dana's voice from downslope. Just one word, my name. Not shouted, not whispered. Measured, almost patient, Owen started toward it before I grabbed his sleeve. Talia said Dana would never have called from that angle, because the slope, there broke into brush and creek stone. 10 minutes later, we heard the same voice from uphill behind the tool shed. Pairs slowed whatever was working us. It no longer got a man alone with the easy certainty it had taken Dana. So it adjusted, small sounds. A boot scrape where no one stood, a radio click from the wrong truck. Marisol's cough from beyond the cook tarp, while Marisol stood beside me holding a mug in both hands. The 7th day, we committed to leaving at first safe opportunity. Even Owen agreed. He spent the afternoon under the brush truck, then under the old crew carrier. Then under the smaller service rig we had parked near the line shack. He came out dirty and silent and showed me the yellow grease pencil marks on the brush truck lugs. Half of them had shifted. Not much. Just enough, a quarter turn on one. Less on another. Days of tiny movement done while the truck sat dark and quiet 20 feet from our bunks. He said it like a prayer he wished he did not believe. Somebody has been working on this every night. That was the first moment I understood we had been wrong about the watching. We had imagined curiosity. Territory, a thing pacing a firelight edge to see what we were. What we had was patience. The next morning Talia took us to the creek crossing, because she said her notebook numbers made no sense unless the flow had been. Diverted, we moved as 2 pairs, close enough to hear breathing. The crossing looked intact from the road, gravel crown still there. Ruts still dry, but when Owen drove the digging bar into the edge, it dropped through almost 2 feet of hollow. We climbed down. The culvert mouth was packed with green saplings cut to near equal length and rammed inward, until water had nowhere to go but under. The roadbed. The supporting rocks that had braced the lower fill were gone, not washed out. Gone, stacked in 3 neat piles under cedar shade 10 yards away. The fill had been eaten from beneath night by night, while we slept above it. Talia stared at the stone piles and said she had heard the creek running wrong on the 3rd night. Ben walked the crossing end to end and found prints in the mud below, not clear enough for shape. Only pressure troughs where something heavy had worked in the dark for hours, sustained effort, planning. Marisol stepped back and looked at the road. Then at the truck we had meant to use, then at the stacked stones. Her face changed before her voice did. It knew we would try to leave today. No one answered. We heard the brush move behind her. She turned. I saw her rise sideways, not upward. Not backward, sideways. 1 second she was on the shoulder with her map tube in one hand. The next she was pulled through a screen of alder trunks too narrow for a man to pass without breaking them. The branches barely shook. Her left boot struck a rock hard enough to spin off and land in the creek. I saw her arm reach once between the leaves. I saw her pencil fall, then nothing. Ben ran 3 steps and stopped because there was nowhere for a human body to have gone. No crash through brush. No path, just tight alder black shade and a damp smell like turned roots. We called her name until our throats hurt. We found the map tube split open. We found her second cup mug, which she had brought down from camp without my seeing, lying upright in the mud with coffee still warm at the bottom. That night we did not light a fire. Owen and I cannibalized parts from the smaller service rig into the old crew carrier, because the brush truck could not be trusted and the creek crossing was dead. The only route left was the West Ridge descent, an older logging track we had written off because it was too rough for routine use. Barely passable, maybe, if the carrier held together. Ben checked the tire pressure with Owen, because routine was all he had left. Talia sat on her cot with the blue notebook open, and did not write in it. I read the Silent Zone protocols again by flashlight, the same 6 pages. The missing 7th, the line about escort. The line about not breaking formation once established. Outside the bunkhouse, something walked the perimeter at a distance too regular to be chance. Not one set of steps, more than one. We left before full dark on the 10th day because waiting for dawn felt worse. Ben drove. Owen sat beside him with the maintenance calendar tucked into his shirt pocket and a wrench in his hand. Talia and I were in the back with the packs and the remaining water. The carrier shook hard enough to rattle our teeth. Every bolt sounded temporary. Every corner felt like a decision made by someone long dead. The mundane things are what stay with me. The smell of spilled coffee in the cab. Ben tapping the wheel twice. Owen wiping his thumb on his pants before checking the gauge light. Then the road bent left, and it was there. It stood in the center of the track where the firs opened. I knew the height because Owen had marked a lightning scar on the nearest pine when he paced the shoulder on the first day. That scar sat at 12 feet and some inches. The top of the thing's head rose above it, not much. Enough, its arms hung below where knees should have been. Its chest was narrow, its hips were wrong. The legs bent too high, the head did not move. The body did, not breathing. Adjusting, waiting. Ben swore once. Owen said, "Do not stop." Ben did not stop. The engine climbed, the lights fixed on it. It remained still, 20 yards. 15, 10. It stepped forward once, that was all. One step, then it placed one hand on the hood. The carrier lurched left. Ben fought the wheel. The steering gave. The right front dropped. We hit the cut bank, glass burst inward, metal screamed. We rolled once, then again. Then we stopped against timber in a dark that smelled of coolant and dirt and blood. Ben was dead. His neck was broken. The cards from his jacket pocket were in the mud by his hand. Owen had blood in one eye, and a wound in his side that soaked through as fast as he pressed it. Talia dragged me through the rear opening, because the side door had jammed. The carrier ticked and hissed behind us. Down the slope something moved between the trees, with no hurry in it at all. We got Owen out, we tried to. He made it 20 yards, then 30. Then he sagged against a stump and laughed once like a man who had finally solved a problem too late to use the answer. He looked back toward the wreck and toward the shapes easing through the dark below us, and said I was almost right. Those were the last words he gave me that made sense. We half carried him until the ground leveled near the old cut line. Then the woods on both sides started pacing us. Not rushing, not closing. Matching, one shape on the left. One on the right, far enough to disappear when I looked straight at them. Close enough that I heard branches take their weight. Talia whispered that if they wanted us running, they would have rushed us already. They did not want us running, they wanted direction. Owen stumbled. I caught him, his blood was hot through my sleeve. Then something struck the brush behind us, and he twisted to look. Talia grabbed my arm so hard her nails tore skin. "Keep moving," so we moved. They followed the survivors out, not chasing. Escorting, fixed distance maintained. The cut line dropped toward the lower road. Dawn began to thin the dark. Owen fell for the last time 50 yards from the tree line above the old landing. He could not stand. He pushed at my shoulder with both hands and told me to take Talia and go. The shapes had stopped just beyond the trunks. I could feel them there like a weather front. I left him. That is the truth that lives in my mouth. I left him because Talia was dragging me, and because the sky was whitening, and because Owen himself had spent 10 days teaching me what a machine sounds like just before it fails. And I knew the same sound in a man. We reached the open landing at first light. The trees held, the shapes held with them. They did not come any further. I do not know if it was the light or if they had already finished what they came to do. We found the county road near noon. Talia flagged the first truck. The county sheriff's office took our statement separately. Then federal investigators took it again. Then district people with new notebooks and old faces took it a third time and watched us the whole time as if the wrong version was the one that would make the paperwork harder. Search teams found Dana 19 days later in a small clearing north of camp. His arms were crossed over his chest. His body lay straight. There was no scavenging, no scatter, no explanation for how he had been carried that far uphill without sign. Marisol was found 6 days after that in a separate clearing almost 2 miles west of the creek crossing. Her arms were crossed too. Her boots had been set beside her. The map tube lay parallel to her left leg. Ben was not found at the crash. That was not in the first report either. He was found later in a meadow opening below the west ridge, laid on his back with both hands folded over his stomach, as if someone had been taught how to arrange a body by watching people do it wrong. Owen was never recovered. The official cause became simple, because simple is what institutions need in order to keep working. A damaged evacuation vehicle, night travel on unstable roads, injuries from rollover, disorientation, exposure, animal activity after death. That was the language, neat language. Language that did not mention the position of the bodies. Language that did not mention the prints above the floor line in the communications trailer. Language that did not mention the inward bow door frame that Nolan Briggs saw before anyone from the district reached camp. The file was closed. Insurance was paid. The Cold Creek site was marked inactive and then abandoned. The new door frame went in before winter. The old one disappeared. Years passed. I transferred out. Talia left field work entirely. She has not gone back into timber after dark since. Neither have I. I am speaking now because last month a young ranger from Red Alder called me and asked if the silent zone protocols were real, or just one more story old hands used to scare new crews into taking radios seriously. He said the district had reopened discussion about access in Upper Cold Creek because the road mattered again and there were bids coming in for thinning and hazard removal. He laughed when he said silent zone like the phrase embarrassed him. I did not laugh. There was never a protocol for us. That is the part I understand now. The document was not protection. It was housekeeping. A set of instructions written by people who had seen the pattern before and chose the smallest possible language that might keep men alive, without ever admitting what the language was for. The unanswered question was never what took Dana, or how Marisol crossed Alder without breaking it, or what stood in the road that night. At 12 feet and change, the unanswered question was who wrote page 7. Someone removed it before we arrived. Someone knew there had once been more. And one thing is still withheld. I have not told you the exact mile marker where the old service route leaves the county road, because I know what people are like when they hear a story with just enough detail to turn it into a destination. I know what crews are like when a place gets a reputation and management starts saying words like anomaly and liability and discontinued observations. Instead of the truth is simple enough. It was not hunting us, it was removing us. The way you remove anything from a place that was never meant for it. If you want a last comfort, I do not have one. I still hear Dana call my name from the wrong side of camp when a radio crackles in empty timber. I still wake with the taste of radiator steam in my mouth. I still see Ben's cards in the mud. I still think about Owen saying he was almost right. Maybe he was. Maybe the rational explanation always does come close, close enough to file, close enough to bury, close enough to send another crew up the road when budgets tighten and memory thins. But not close enough, because the place is still there. The creek still runs under that road. The trees still hold the line at dawn. And something is still happening to crews that go into that forest.